What happens when a man who has saved lives on distant battlefields is treated like a criminal in his own homeland? What does it say about a country when the color of your skin outweighs the medals on your chest? Commander Jackson Theron, a decorated Special Forces field surgeon, had just stepped off stage at a prestigious military medical summit in Portland, Oregon. He was 42 years old, tall, calm, with deep obsidian skin and eyes that had seen the raw edge of war and survived it. He had served in some of the world's most dangerous places, from Kandahar to Fallujah, pulling the dying back from the brink, holding lives together with bloody hands and sheer will. Soldiers called him the quiet anchor. But back home, despite the stripes on his uniform, too often he was just another black man behind the wheel. On that fateful afternoon, Jackson drove alone across the vast desert highways of eastern Utah. His SUV was sleek, well-kept, bearing Oregon plates, humming softly as it cut through the barren expanse. The road stretched endlessly, framed by rock and dust. It was a kind of silence he normally welcomed. Except today, it felt like the calm before a storm. Then came the flashing lights. The patrol cruiser surged into view behind him. Sirens off, but urgency painted across its movement. Jackson, ever composed, checked his mirrors, slowed his speed, and pulled to the shoulder with measured grace. He'd survived airstrikes and ambushes. This was just another protocol dot, or so he thought. From the patrol car stepped Deputy Rick Halston, a local enforcer infamous among his peers for being both aggressive and arrogant. Blonde, buzz-cut, mirrored sunglasses, the kind of man who carried power like a weapon and wielded it recklessly. "You think you're above the law out here?" Halston barked, voice dripping with contempt as he approached. "This is my desert, and I don't care who you think you are." Jackson, unshaken, reached calmly for his military ID and vehicle documents, keeping his movements slow and visible. But Halston wasn't interested in credentials. He ripped the papers from Jackson's hand, tossed them to the ground, and motioned toward the back of the vehicle. "Out. Now." Jackson obeyed, still composed, but things escalated fast. Halston shoved him hard against the SUV, barked accusations of resisting inspection, and before long, had Jackson face down in the gravel, cuffed, bleeding from a gash near his temple. The sun glared down, indifferent that IT was clear. Halston wasn't here to serve justice. He was here to assert control. At any cost that AS reinforcement arrived, a second cruiser kicking up dust in the distance. Jackson made a move only someone like him would have prepared for. Tucked in his boot was a micro-military-grade emergency phone, untraceable, secure, direct to the Pentagon. He activated it with a single press. "This is Commander Theron," he whispered. "Emergency protocol. Patch me to Director Hensley." The device clicked. Then a sharp, authoritative voice cut through the static. "This is Director Kira Hensley, National Defense Command. Who has detained my officer? Identify yourself now." Halston froze, phone in hand, the mask of control cracking. But the desert had seen it all. Unbeknownst to the officers, a traveler parked on a ridge, unseen but recording everything, captured the brutality on camera. Every insult, every unnecessary blow. The footage began its silent journey online, first a whisper, then a scream. And in that chaos, something began to shift. The moment wasn't about two men in the desert anymore. It was about power, truth, dignity, race. A system that had long allowed men like Halston to walk unchecked, now facing the eye of accountability. That A.S. Halston gritted his teeth, still pretending to hold control. Jackson's eyes remained steady, bleeding, bruised, but unbroken. Because when you've survived the worst the world has to offer, no amount of hate can strip away who you are. And this was only the beginning. The tension in the desert thickened like the heat shimmering off the asphalt. Director Kira Hensley's voice had sliced through the chaos like a scalpel. "This is Director Hensley, U.S. Department of Defense. You are detaining a decorated commander. Identify yourself now." Deputy Rick Halston's smug expression faltered, but his pride wouldn't let go. He doubled down, barking orders with heightened aggression. His resolve wasn't about justice. It was about dominance. Then came Officer Dale Pute, towering, tattooed with white supremacist symbols, and known among the locals as a brute in uniform. His presence cast a darker shadow over the scene. Without hesitation, he joined Halston, and together, they unleashed a savage beating on Commander Jackson Theron. They seized Jackson's emergency backup phone, the very lifeline that had alerted the Pentagon. It wasn't just violence, it was a silencing, calculated, cold, and designed to erase resistance. Jackson, despite the blows, held on to his dignity. His eyes, swollen but sharp, spoke of someone who had seen worse in Kandahar and Ramadi. He knew what this was, not an arrest, but a statement that they shoved him into the back of a dusty cruiser and headed toward the notorious Dust Creek detention facility. Fate wasn't done writing. A lone figure, half hidden behind a broken fence, had caught the entire assault on camera. The footage, raw, unfiltered, every shout and punch, was instantly uploaded and sent directly to Director Hensley. Even as Jackson was cut off from the Pentagon, the truth had found another path. At Dust Creek, things got uglier. Behind rusted bars and flickering lights, Halston and Pute resumed their assault, certain they'd silenced their target for good. But Jackson had prepared for the worst. Hidden in his combat boot was a second phone, military grade, shielded and nearly impossible to trace. Bloodied but never broken, he waited. When the moment came, he activated it. One silent tap, just enough. Back outside, that viral video exploded online. Outrage flared across the nation. And then, like thunder rolling in the distance, came the roar of military engines. From Nellis Air Force Base, a convoy of military police vehicles sped across the desert, sirens howling like war drums. The very desert that had seen injustice now echoed with justice inbound. As the armored vehicles arrived at Dust Creek, the tide turned. Halston, Pute, and the others froze as screens mounted on the tactical units began playing the footage in crisp high definition. Every blow, every slur, every lie. Within minutes, they were disarmed, detained, and read their rights by officers who respected the uniform they wore. Commander Theron was extracted, battered, but unyielding. A ghost of a smile flickered on his lips. The system had tried to bury him, but truth had become its own weapon. But peace is a temporary thing. Just days later, as justice began to move, another storm brewed. Senator Travis Halston, Rick's older brother and a political powerhouse, took to the airwaves. He called Jackson Theron a rogue operative, claimed the military had threatened local law enforcement, said Jackson had brought war tactics to small-town America. His words ignited chaos. Media outlets spun, debates flared, and the nation split again. And then a new video emerged. Jackson, allegedly, could be heard saying, "I'll send the army to clean this place up myself." A threat, a warning. Only it wasn't real. Forensic analysts uncovered the truth within hours. The video was a deepfake, a malicious fabrication released from a pack tied to Senator Halston. The deception crumbled. Public fury turned. Now, it wasn't just about Dust Creek. It was about truth, power, and how far corruption would go to protect its own. Commander Jackson Theron was exonerated. And the story? It had only begun. Colonel Jackson Theron, now dressed once again in his immaculate military uniform, stood before a room filled with high-ranking military officials and political figures. His chest adorned with medals and badges that told the story of years of sacrifice. His presence alone spoke volumes of his strength and character. As he addressed the crowd, his voice was calm yet unwavering, filled with the kind of resolve only forged through the heat of battle and the fire of injustice. "In America," he began, his voice echoing in the large chamber, "even a war hero can be buried by a lie if the system wants it that way. But heroes don't quit, and neither should we." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. What began as a personal battle for justice had evolved into a call to arms for everyone who had been wronged by a system that often placed power over truth. His words resonated deeply within the hearts of many, sparking a movement that spread like wildfire across the nation. People took to social media, their posts filled with hashtags and messages of solidarity, calling for accountability, transparency, and reform. Support poured in from all corners of society. Veterans, students, families, anyone who had ever felt the sting of prejudice or the burden of a broken system. They rallied behind Jackson, demanding a change that would honor not just those who served, but the values of honor, respect, and truth. Meanwhile, Senator Travis Callahan's carefully constructed narrative began to unravel. As the public was presented with more undeniable evidence of the deep fake video and his attempt to manipulate the truth, his credibility collapsed. The political maneuvering, that had once seemed so powerful was exposed as nothing more than a desperate attempt to shield his own ego and protect his corrupt allies. The public's trust in him evaporated, and his political future dimmed in the wake of his actions that end the final moments of this turbulent saga. Jackson Theron stood before a massive crowd gathered outside a government building, the first rays of dawn illuminating his face. His expression was one of quiet determination, a man who had weathered unimaginable storms and yet emerged unbroken. The crowd, a reflection of a nation longing for change, chanted his name in unison. They weren't just chanting for him, they were chanting for justice, for a future where truth and integrity triumphed over hate and division. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment, as Jackson's voice rang out one last time. If you believe that rank should matter more than race, then let us stand together and demand a system that values truth above all. That moment, powerful and pivotal, marked a turning point, not just for Jackson, but for an entire nation. His battle had become a collective struggle for fairness, equality, and unity. The people rallied behind him, not just because of the personal injustice he had endured, but because they saw in him the embodiment of a movement that refused to be silenced by the chains of prejudice. In the weeks that followed, Jackson continued his work from behind the scenes. He advocated for policy changes, focused on dismantling systemic discrimination, and worked tirelessly to ensure that the voices of those who had been silenced for far too long would be heard. He had gone from being a decorated war hero to a revered leader, a symbol of resilience and hope in a nation plagued by division and corruption. His legacy was cemented, not by his battlefield accomplishments alone, but by his relentless pursuit of justice. His story served as a potent reminder that even in the face of overwhelming injustice, the courage to stand up for what is right could spark change in the hearts of millions. In a world where lies could bury heroes and prejudice could obscure truth, Jackson Theron proved that real heroes never quit. The fight for justice, dignity, and equality was not just a battle worth fighting. It was a battle that would be fought every single day. Heroes don't quit, Jackson said, as his story continued to inspire those who refused to remain silent in the face of injustice.